Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Jon Davids. Today's topic, an influencer primer, avoiding potholes on the yellow brick road. Now, Jon is the founder and CEO of Influicity. I can't believe I actually said that right. A company that helps other companies build communities. He's also the author of Marketing Superpowers. Build a brand so good that customers feel like it's magic. Jon believes one of the keys to finding brands is building the community that builds your brand for you, and he's here today to talk about it. Welcome, Jon.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be here in the confidential suite.
There you go. Yes, you're in the top secret, super secret CMO Confidential suites. So let's start, let's just start big here in terms of everyone wants to build a community, and a lot of people will tell our marketers or ad agencies, go build a community for it. How do you define community? Like when we're talking about community on this show, just give us a discussion of community.
A definition of community that everyone can understand. All right, so I'll make it really simple. Think of a fan or an audience, the whole fandom culture that people look at, or creators and celebrity culture. A community is sort of like that, but it self-propels. So the one feature that I look for in a community versus just saying I have an audience is that audiences generally kind of keep to themselves. They observe, they enjoy, they watch, and they're great. But communities and brands with communities tend to self-propel. So think about people that love Harley Davidson, people that love sneakers, people that love comics. They have conferences, they have lineups, they have meetups, they do these things on their own. And that to me is what a community looks like.
Got it. So one of the things that is hard to put your arms around, or if you're looking at it, you say, how big is the community world really? And is it like the universe is ever expanding? Like how do we even think about communities?
Definitely expanding, but I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday. The idea that our lives and our culture is getting more crowded with more communities, if you will, more things that take our time. And I think it's getting crowded, but in a more accurate way, it's just splintering off, because it's not like time is expanding. We're just finding things that are more suited to exactly what we want. So this podcast is a great example. And there's a whole bunch of marketing podcasts you can listen to, but this one has a very specific niche, CMO Confidential conversations that people would love to have in the C-suite, but maybe they don't always have them. They're not always quite as open. So this is one example of, a community coming together for one particular purpose. And I think as you think about it as more splintered, it creates opportunity to find your own wedge and edge to get in.
I think that's a really good way to start this, I think. And all you listeners, go self-propel CMO Confidential for us, if you don't mind. So, there's always been communities, essentially. They just didn't have social media and the internet and everything to make them work. Why is it so important now?
It's important now because getting attention is just harder and harder. It's getting more expensive. It's getting more difficult. And so if you think about a way that a brand can grow, the old way, or the way that I think we've been focused on for the last 15 years or so, is really what I call the messy marketing math, which is, how do I spend $1 to make $4? How do I get Facebook to work? Oh, geez, Instagram change their algorithm. Oh, TikTok is not working like it used to. TikTok Shops is different. So there's so much dependency on these paid platforms, and they've effectively trained the marketing community that this is the way to think about marketing. But if you kind of do a 180 and look at it from the other side, there are brands that are self-propelling every day. They're being built on on TikTok, on podcast, on email, organically. They have lineups out the door when you're driving down the street. People are waiting for that next sneaker drop or that bakery with the best cupcakes. And so if you think about a way to reach your customers that is more sustainable and that you can own versus constantly having to rent space on somebody else's platform, that's why I think communities are really picking up and the conversations are becoming more real and more brands are doing it.
And we're going to talk a little later. I want to make sure we talk about it. Building a community is not as easy as just saying you want one, because I think there's a lot of people out there where the marketer will be in the room and everyone will go build a community. You're like, okay, I'll do that by tomorrow. And we're seeing the decline in a huge amount of media, TV, absolutely, traditional TV, on the way down at speed, cookies disappearing. So targeting is becoming a lot harder. What do communities replace in the traditional marketing model? So we got all our listeners out there thinking, all right, how do I plug in a community? Is it a net extra thing? Is it a replacement? How do I think about it?
It's a different way of thinking about some of the stuff that you're doing now, and probably for most brands, at least, not doing as effectively as you could. So the way I think about it is you have your paid marketing mix, and that looks different for different brands, but let's just say it's Google, it's Meta, maybe it's billboards, television, over the top, etc. And so you've got that piece, and then you have this whole other piece, which to a lot of brands, let's face it, is a bit of a nuisance and a bit of a black hole of I'm on TikTok. It looks like I'm getting some likes. My followers are growing, but am I actually driving results? And so the conversation that I have with marketers quite a bit is let's look at that in a more holistic way. And let's think about it as from a standpoint of metrics that aren't the I spend $1 to make $4, but there are 1,000 people here. And every time we drop a new product or announce a special offer, they're very loud on social. They amplify us. Well, who are these people? What brings them together? What's the common thread here? And starting to think about them and focus on those, really what we call the seeds of a community, to grow from there. So in terms of replacement, I would say you're not going to do anything that you're not already doing. You're just going to think about it a little different and hopefully get much better results from it.
And let's do a little sidebar, because a lot of times the community is, or you get tasked as a marketer with just do everything we're doing and build a community around it. Are you saying you can do that, or you have to actually nurture the community differently or build it differently?
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as I'm going to go to the community store and grab myself a couple bags of community followers.
Yeah, I'm doing the community fertilizer, and suddenly I'll put it on the lawn and I'll have a whole community there. Yeah, all right.
Call me on Tuesday.
How do you manage this when you say I'm going to go build a community sets, and the company says, "Great, give it to me"? And what are your measures? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah. So I'll go to the book here, because there's one simple formula in Marketing Superpowers that I pulled that sort of explains all this. So I'll just give you the exact 3-step formula that we've used for a long time at Influicity. It starts with a unifying belief. So what does the brand stand for that our customers can get behind? And that's not the same thing as a mission statement. The first time I say that to a marketer, they give me some lofty, ridiculous, we're trying to save the world.
We're going to make the world a better place. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're not trying to democratize anything. I don't want to hear the word democratize one more time. So what are people actually wanting from you? What's that belief? The second thing we look at is what are the faith drivers? So do you have testimonials? Do you have raving fans? Do you have case studies? Do you have reviews, ratings? What are the things that we can do to prove that you are the one to be rallying around this belief? And the final thing is action. What can people do if they are a fan of this, if they are a follower of yours? What can they do? And most of the time that's buy a product, maybe join a newsletter, come to an event, something like that. So it really is belief, then faith, then action. And the way that actually manifests itself, we see it happening all the time. The examples of any major brand that has a cult following, the U.S. presidential elections for the last 50 years have all followed this exact formula. Yep. Every religion. So any movement or anything in our culture that has what I would call a community around it kind of follows that pattern. And so you got to start from step 1 and then go to step 2 and step 3.
Hey, so 2 questions. is this a standalone thing or is it need something else with it? And if I'm like in a B2B space, a lot of these brands have a lot of emotion around them you just talked about, whether it's, running or music or anything else. If I'm sitting there as software as a service or middleware, can I do it? So the first question is this a companion marketing thing or a thing on its own? And then does it work for all businesses, B2B and B2C?
I love that question, Mike, because people don't realize this. At Influicity, the majority of our clients are actually B2B. We promote the ones like the Toyotas and the Disneys of the world, but our biggest client is actually a financial brokerage. It's one of the big brokerages, and they're selling B2B and high ticket B2C. And so the quick answer is yes, it works in B2B very much so. What I like to talk about is think about the fundamental human desires. And so if you think about it, everyone's sort of going for wealth, health, and love in some form. And when we're talking about B2B, usually that falls in the wealth space. Yeah. And so when I talk to a business owner that has, let's say, a B2B fintech company, a SaaS product, what I'm saying is, listen, what is the thing you're actually trying to solve? The people at the hedge fund that you're selling to are pulling their hair out because their financial data system is from 1986. And they are tired of it. It's clunky, it's broken, and you're bringing them in to the 21st century here. And so thinking about that and what the emotion that people are actually feeling from the client side, that works in B2B and B2C. We're all humans. Lawyers and doctors, they all feel the same thing as, 13-year-old girls who want to wear the coolest pair of shoes. So it definitely works in B2B as well. And then your question around, is there a companion piece to it? The crazy thing is there are many, many brands on social media that will get to $10, $15 million in revenue without spending $1 on Facebook or Google ads. And I know because a lot of them come to us to kind of pick them up from there. So yeah, it could be a companion as you scale, but from day one, it doesn't have to be.
Thank you for that. So if you're sitting out there, you're looking at your business, you're in the marketing chair or the agency chair, what situations are best suited to actually think I should have a community or not? And I know there's an answer. Yes, gosh, if you can, everyone should have a community. But what is, if you're in the sweet spot, and you don't know, what's a sweet spot look like?
The sweet spot looks like you don't need to make your next dollar tomorrow. So I'll tell you the situation I hate, Mike. Somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, Jon, this sounds awesome. Let's build a community. Let's work together." And then I say, "Oh, great. What are your goals?" Well, my goals are, I'm down to my last 3 weeks of cash and I need to sell $1 million in the next month. Yeah. And I say, "Whoa, okay, let's crank up your Facebook ads there, buddy, because we gotta bring some money in fast." So is it a quick fix? Let's bring in money tomorrow? Absolutely not. No way. You always start, my theme is you start with rented demand because it's cheap and quick, or I should say it's quick at least. And then you move to owned demand, which is where
when you say rented demand, you are talking about Facebook and search and everything else, right?
You got it. I'm talking about what I call the slot machines of marketing. I put in $1, I make $3. Whippy, I can do this all day. At a certain point that will break. So that's not a forever strategy, but it's a great starting strategy.
Got it. So that is super interesting. How do you go? So you need to have a good time frame on this and say, this is going to take a while. How long is a while? And how do I know it's working once I start this?
So I'm a fan of quick wins. Anytime we start with a client, and I recommend this for any agency people or marketers listening in your organization, go for the low-hanging fruit first. There are ways to release TikToks that get a lot of views quickly. There are ways to do that on X and podcasts and email. So you want to have short-term metrics that are enough of a dopamine hit that others can have confidence and say, yeah, you know what, this is working. Let's go ahead and keep going.
And is that always views? Is that the short-term dopamine hit? Is views, or is it click-through rate, or what is the short-term what's the short-term metric that is a good dopamine hit?
It's definitely consumption. So it would be views and then likes. And then a big one, probably the biggest, is actually shares. How many people
Shares.
actually shared this item?
And do you have well, one, I love a good example if you can share any company with it. And then what's a good percentage of likes and shares versus views?
That's a great one. So I'll give you one from this morning. So we just launched with a new client. It's a pet food company. Won't say the name, but it's a big pet food company. And we took over their TikTok. So they're on TikTok, and TikTok is a huge mechanism for driving revenue, real revenue for especially pet brands, which is a big segment of ours. And so on their TikTok, really every TikTok they have released to date has gotten 200 or 300 views, 0 likes, 0 shares. And we released the first one this morning, and it's already, as of right now, at about 18,000 views. It's been shared dozens and dozens of times. And so right off the bat,
what's the magic, though, you put in there that was different than their old things? You don't have to tell us the brand, but you can tell us the magic.
I'll give you the secret sauce. So on TikTok, it was a 3-parter TikTok. What does that mean? The TikTok starts with, this is part 1 of a 3-part TikTok. Each one's a minute long. And I'm going to tell you how to train your pet to do X. I think we did balance a bone on your nose, whatever that was. So right away, people are hooked on one, and we've left them with a cliffhanger. So now they have to follow us and subscribe and share because they want to see 2 and 3. Number 2, we opened the TikTok. The first 2 seconds of a TikTok were the most important. You have to hook people. We hooked them with something that was super relatable. If you're like me and your dog always does this, I have the answer for you. So those are 2 things that we did. And then in addition to that, it's a cute dog. It's bright colors with the bone. And so we did a few things that we knew would work on TikTok. Why was that the first one that we released? Because we knew it would blow up. And we wanted to give this client confidence. They've been burned 100 times with other TikTok agencies. So we wanted to give them confidence, and thankfully it worked.
I got it. So let's talk also. So this is just a cold video you put into TikTok. Let's talk about influencers. A bunch of people are out there. Obviously, influencers are a big deal now. Tell us how you think about influencers. And then if you decide to use influencers, how do you decide which ones to pick for you?
I think about influencers as 2 buckets. There's the creative, and then there's the reach. So influencers do both of those things. They're creative people, and they also have audiences, and the audiences can be 10,000 people, could be 10 million people, or anything in between or above that. And so what I like to say when you think about how to use them, you can use them for their creative chops, or you can use them for their reach, or both. And how do you pick them? What I like to say is, if you look at their last 3 or 4 pieces of content, written content, video, photo, whatever they make, just assume that whatever they make for you is going to look exactly like that. And so if you don't like it, don't think that you can instruct them out of it. Hey, I like what you did there, but try this instead. No. Find a different influencer. There's lots of them. So they're going to make what they make. They're very good at that. They know their audience. And if you like it, great. If you don't, move on.
So inherent in that is, if you have an influencer with great reach for you, but you hate the creative, that is a really bad pick.
You're going to be asking for revisions, 20 times, and they're never going to give you what you want. So I wouldn't pick that influencer.
Got it. And how do you think about paying influencers?
Ooh.
Like, what's a good price? Because you're under marketers, obviously under enormous cost pressure. You're the influencer or any of this. It's going to get a lot of attention by the company. How do I think about what I pay for it, in addition to how I evaluate it? Because you're going to put out this money usually, then you're going to get some, hopefully, dopamine measures, but then everyone's going to go, I need you to sell a lot of stuff. How do I think about what I pay?
You think about it in the exact same way you think about every other media vehicle. So the way we've been doing it at Influicity, literally since day one, which is 9 years ago now, is we put together a CPM calculator, and we say, how many followers do they have? What's the average impression count? What do we think that they're worth versus everything else that we could do? Other digital, other linear, what have you. And so the way I look at it is, you say, okay, it's video content. They're going to make food. Let's say it's a food brand. food brands do charge a little more because there's a lot that goes into doing a food video. We'll pay this person a $35 CPM for a video. And then you just look at how many views they historically get and you calculate from there. And the funny thing is you will do the math and we'll say, okay, this person's worth $3,500 for a video based on those metrics. And we go to them and say, hey, what do you charge for a video? And they say, I charge $15,000. We say, okay, good luck with that. We're moving on. And so, you have the ability, it really is a buyer's market in the world of influencer. There's far more supply than demand, which means you have your options ahead of you. And the thing I always advise brands is never fall in love with an influencer. If a client says to you, hey, I really want to work with this person. Whoa, no. You want to reach this audience. We'll find the vehicle that's right for you with these million influencers we can choose from. Don't fall in love with the first one you see.
So this is probably really hard for a lot of people because there's not like a roster of, I guess maybe there is a roster of influencers, but there's not like when you buy TV or you buy radio or you buy search, you can see everything that's available. Is there a way to look at all this stuff in one place for our marketers out there?
So the quick answer is no. I mean, the answer is yes. You can hunt. I've always been wary, and we've completely resisted for almost a decade putting a roster, quote unquote, together. Because once you have a roster, you're basically married to those people as the person who is at the company. So I've always said, I don't want to be representing both the buyer and the seller. That is a major conflict of interest. And the buyer could never be totally confident that I'm not just giving them this person because I'm getting a commission on that side and they're haggling me for work. So the way to really do it is if you're going to work with any agency that has a roster, make sure that you know that whoever they're recommending to you, yeah, they might be good, they might be great, but there's always going to be a bias there. At Influicity, we work with maybe 7,000 or 8,000 influencers a year. Sometimes we work with the same ones multiple times, but that's becoming more rare as more of them come up. We're usually kind of switching and finding new ones.
And by definition, the roster can never be complete because there's so many people coming in and out of the story. So how do you actually hunt for the new stuff?
I mean, we have a team of 4 people that do it. They're way better at it than me, but really it's a matter of being on TikTok. There's a bunch of dashboards that we use. We've created our own software and you're looking at hashtags. So for example, we go back to the example from this morning. We're looking for people in the pet care category, people that have dogs. And so what are we going to search for? Maybe it's a breed of dog. We're searching for German Shepherd on TikTok. And we see, if you search that hashtag, you start to see thousands of pieces of content. Then you dig through it, either manually or some automated fashion, and you start to find people. Then you DM them. So it's a laborious process. It's not a quick process, but like I said, with some scale, we're doing it a lot, and brands need to think about doing that too. You can't just go back to the same well for the same people.
So this is a living being or living ecosystem where you have to manage it. I think that's very helpful. How do you structure the contract with the influencer? If you're doing this directly as a brand, how do you do this so that given that the roster's changing, the measures are changing, everything's changing, what do you think about there?
Yeah, you structure it. So our influencer contract's about 4 pages. We're looking at what exactly are the deliverables? What are you giving to us? What's the time frame? How many chances for revisions do we have? What do the usage rights look like? Do we have the ability to use this organically and in a paid environment? Is there a time limit on it? So you want to think about all those things, and you generally want to have a sense of what's important to you such that you're not just asking for everything and then, losing the stuff that's important and maybe getting some stuff that's irrelevant. So think about what is the actual use case for this content, and just make sure as much as possible you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. One more thing I'll say, Mike, if you're working with an agency, let me rephrase that. If the influencer is represented by an agency, and that agency is the one you're dealing with directly, again, just make sure that they have your best interests at heart from a brand standpoint, because they can't realistically represent both sides equally.
Got it. Thank you. Hey, what would be, if we had a biggest Hall of Fame mistakes brands and marketers make when trying to build a community, what would be in that Hall of Fame mistakes?
The number one thing I see, and I actually have, I do a keynote and I have this graph that I show. The number one mistake is that they quit before they have a chance to take off because they think it's not working, right? The chart sort of, you go up a little bit, you go down a little bit, it sort of fluctuates over time. And then at a certain point, the chart propels. And in my graphic, I show, okay, but just a week before it had a chance to propel, you cut off your spend and you were done with it. So you have to remember that when you go into a community building environment, and that's something you're going to do as a company, you need to actually have the stomach to commit to 6 months, a year, 18 months, make it a part of your strategy. And that's also going back to what we were saying earlier, Mike. If this is how you're going to make money this quarter, it's probably not a good time to do it.
Right.
Figure out the way. Not. Yeah, make sure you have a revenue source so you actually have the comfort to spend some time doing this.
So all fame mistake one is patience. Give us 2 and 3, and if there's a 4, give us those mistakes people make.
Biggest mistakes when it comes to community building would be patience for sure. Sticking with the same failing strategy for too long without pivoting, that's another big one. So if you're doing the same Instagram content day in, day out, and it's not resonating, you need to be pivoting more quickly because the faster you pivot, the faster you learn.
And there's a difference there between patience and pivot. Patience says, I'm going to keep doing this. Pivot says, but I'm going to do it differently. Versus they're not the same thing there, right?
100%. Pivoting is something that is actually built into the process. We're going to try 57 different experiments in the next quarter and fully expect, by the way, that 54 of them are going to fail. And the 3 that work, great. Now we have the basis for the next 3, the next quarter. So pivoting is part of the process, 100%.
Any other mistakes you want to add in there? Because patience and pivot are great.
Yeah, the last one I'll throw in. Can I make it a P? I can't make it a P, but I'll give you one more anyway.
All alliteration is all gone out of the show now. So
the last one I would say is really just about thinking about size of community. So a lot of people think I need to build a community of a million people, of 100,000 people, especially if you're in a B2B category or any kind of high ticket category. You could have a community of 2,000 or 3,000 people, and they could pay your bills for the next 20 years. We see this a lot in the B2B category where people, for example, have newsletters that have 2,500 subscribers, but everyone's paying them $1,000 a month or a year. And so those can actually do quite well.
Got it. Thank you for that. So where is all this heading? Give us a picture of how this looks in 5 years. And is AI going to impact this a lot? Like on influencer selection or anything else. So 5 years, or you don't have to go 5 years, just out in the future and then write in the AI impact on this as well.
I would say AI will make a lot of things easier. I'm hoping AI will make influencer discovery and sourcing and tracking much easier. We're seeing some tools there, nothing that is happening so remarkable today. But in 5 years, I could imagine that the back end, which is quite messy today, will be optimized. And on the front end, I see huge changes. AI creators and AI influencers, I think, will be a huge piece of our future. And the analogy I would give is look at cartoons. Would anybody have thought back in 1957 that Mickey Mouse would be an icon? That Bart Simpson would be an icon, that Bugs Bunny. And so cartoons actually took on a life form and people saw them as, they became viable entertainment that people fell in love with. The same thing with anime and whatnot. I think AI generated content and characters that not only are cartoon in a sense, but can actually respond and interact and learn and grow. I think that's something to watch out for.
And beneath that is, I think, an assertion that communities are going to get bigger and bigger in the next 5 years. Is that also like a lot bigger, or bigger than a bread box, or bigger than an elephant?
I'm going to say bigger than an elephant, and I'll go back to the word I used before. We're going to see more and more splintering. So people that are interested in thing A will now be interested in version 69472 of thing A, because it'll have 7,000 different versions. And so we're going to see a lot more splintering in the market.
Got it. Thank you very much. So last question, because we're running out of time. This has been a great show. Funniest story and or piece of practical advice we haven't discussed yet for our listeners. You can take one or both, but you have to take at least one.
I'm going to take both if I can.
Oh, you can.
Funniest story. Probably 3 years into Influicity, we got a client that was selling tampons, female hygiene products. And here I think I might have had one employee, but it was pretty much just me running the whole business. And I had to arbitrate, and they chose the influencer. The influencer wasn't giving them what they wanted. And I had to arbitrate between two young women on the best way to promote tampons. And it was a pretty uncomfortable situation, but effectively what happened was the words that the client wanted, the brand here wanted to use to describe the product, the influencer wasn't comfortable saying that word for word. She said, this is, it sounds like you're trying to script me. My audience is going to call me out for it. They're going to say I'm selling out. And so I had to kind of get in the middle. It all ended well, but that was probably a bit uncomfortable for me. But in the end, the client was happy. So I was happy. So that would be the kind of the funny story. The thing that I would say that everyone should think about going forward is what I talk about in Marketing Superpowers, and you alluded to it earlier. People are going to think, well, that's just for consumer brands or that's just for millennial brands. What I will say is that every brand in the next 10 years, 5 years probably, is going to have to think about what their community strategy is and reaching people in an organic way and not just relying on the paid platforms. And so the principles that I talk about in here are universal, and I think any marketer, entrepreneur, business builder needs to know how they work.
So I think that's a great wrap. Get a real community strategy, and if you're not doing it now, start practicing with it. Thank you, Jon, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you are enjoying our show, please like, share, and subscribe. And look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network. These shows include Marketing, the battle between believers and non-believers, parts 1 and 2. Is the CMO position the hardest job in business? The case for customer lifetime value, why is this so hard? And is artificial intelligence an extinction event for agencies? Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.